Russian President Vladimir Putin's hybrid war against Europe has just intensified. A Russian spy ship has been discovered sailing off the Irish coast, and it may be doing what so many of Russia's other spy ships are attempting to do, and ultimately cause a communication blackout that rocks Ireland. Perhaps Putin's preparing for a future where Russia is at war with NATO, and if so, his spy ship near Ireland may be just the tip of his hybrid warfare spear. It all started on April 10. That's when the Irish Times reported that Ireland had tracked a Russian ship acting suspiciously in the waters of the country's coast. The ship was identified as the Viktor Leonov, which is part of the Russian Navy's Northern Fleet, and it didn't seem to be doing much of anything. The ship was simply loitering, hanging around in Irish waters. That's the problem. The Irish Naval Service tried to flag the ship, attempting to communicate with its crew several times. It got nothing in response. But make no mistake, this isn't some sort of Russian ghost ship stranded in Irish waters. That lack of response involved the ship acknowledging that it received the attempts at communication before it went radio silent. This is a message. Russia is saying that it knows people are watching it, but it simply doesn't care. Putin's vessels will carry on doing whatever it is they feel like doing, and they're not going to tell anybody about it. Ireland's response has been to track the ship as it sails around its waters. It has deployed the Lé Samuel Beckett to patrol the Irish Exclusive Economic Zone, or EEZ. An EEZ is a portion of a sea or ocean typically extending 200 miles from a country's coast. In Ireland's case, it controls the EEZ off its coast, meaning it has a right to communicate with and even divert vessels attempting to sail through those waters. It's trying to do that with the Russian ship right now, and it's failing. That means all it can do is send a ship of its own to observe and provide a physical presence to reinforce to the Viktor Leonov's crew that they're being watched. Irish government officials have been briefed about the ship's presence. The Lé Samuel Beckett is maintaining a constant vigil, accompanied by several maritime patrol aircraft operating out of Dublin's Casement Aerodrome and RAF Lossiemouth in Scotland. Interestingly, they've watched the Viktor Leonov take a very purposeful route. Though it's travelling through Ireland's EEZ, it hasn't strayed so far toward the Irish coast that it's entered the country's territorial waters, which extend for 12 miles from the coast. That means the Viktor Leonov isn't breaking any maritime laws, at least none that are known of. Still, its very presence, combined with its lack of communication and the knowledge that the Viktor Leonov is a spy ship, is a massive cause for concern. The Viktor Leonov is a Vyshnya-class level developed by the Soviet Union during the 1980s. The ship is large, measuring around 300 feet in length with a 47-foot beam, and is capable of displacing 3,470 tons when it has a full load. It's not the fastest ship in the world, only travelling at a speed of 16 knots, but it can carry up to 146 crew members and is home to an array of spying equipment that allows it to conduct reconnaissance in another country's waters. That equipment includes a radar to alert the ship of incoming surface threats, along with a sonar that allows it to scan underneath the water's surface. It's also packed with electronic warfare equipment, including several intercept arrays it can use to jam incoming signals. The ship isn't helpless when caught in a fight either. It has a pair of AK-636 barrel 30mm Gatling machine guns that are capable of rattling off high explosive and fragmentation rounds at a rate of between 4,000 and 10,000 per minute, depending on the variant. Plus, it has two SA-N8 surface-to-air missile launchers it can use to confront aerial threats as a last resort. Thankfully, it looks like the ship has no intention of using those launchers against the Irish maritime ships that are watching it. Putin likely wouldn't risk sparking an international incident over his spying operation, but the fact that they're even there tells us that this is no average ship. It exists solely for military purposes, and it's being used by Putin to engage in a terrible form of hybrid warfare. It's also not the first time that the Viktor Leonov has been caught engaging in activities that it shouldn't engage in. For example, 2019 saw the United States complain about the Viktor Leonov acting in an unsafe manner off the coast of Georgia and South Carolina. Its modus operandi was precisely what we saw in Ireland, The ship refused to respond to any efforts made to communicate with its crew by civilian vessels and provided no information about its intended movements. A year later, the Viktor Leonov was caught again in British waters, attempting to track a US submarine that was docking in the UK. The response was almost immediate. As soon as the UK noted the Russian spy ship's presence, it sent out a warship of its own to move it away from British waters. The Journal, another Irish publication, points out that the Russian ship left Irish waters on April 11, leading to Ireland standing its military response down. However, it also notes that another Russian spy ship recently passed through Irish waters, this time en route to the Caribbean. The Irish Times also notes that Ireland has also caught out the Yantar, another Russian spy ship, multiple times as it sailed in Irish waters near key subsea cables. The Yantar was even spotted as recently as November 2024, with its crew flying drones in what appears to have been an attempt to scan the Irish waters. So, what was the Viktor Leonov doing in Irish waters at all? It's possible that the ship was passing through the waters on its way to Cuba. Though Russia has sent ships to the island nation before to conduct joint military exercises, most recently during the summer of 2024. If the journey to Cuba was all that the ship had on its agenda, it may still have sailed through Irish waters, but it would have communicated what it was doing, and it certainly would have stayed in those waters for hours on end, seeming to do a whole lot of nothing. The fact that it stopped at all has led some to speculate that it was engaging in surveillance. The question now is, to what end? An upcoming NATO operation may provide the answer, according to the Journal. It proposes that the Viktor Leonov isn't heading to Cuba at all, but instead will sail into the Mediterranean. There, it will loiter to keep an eye on what the Journal dubs a huge demonstration of Western military power, which will include the Prince of Wales aircraft carrier, along with a group of other British ships set to take part in Neptune Strike 2025-1. The exercise has already been launched, beginning on April 1st, and is one of the first maritime vigilance campaigns NATO will operate this year. The idea is to create a capabilities demonstration, showcasing how NATO could respond to deter and defend against any naval threats that approach via Europe's southern flank. Along with the UK, NATO members, including Italy, Spain, Greece, Canada, France, Norway, and Portugal among others, will take part. The main objective, according to NATO itself, is to ensure all participating nations are prepared to maintain freedom of navigation while securing maritime choke points. In other words, it's a test of how well NATO forces can work together. And Russia will definitely want to gather information from that test, which may be the Viktor Leonov's task. Around the same time as Neptune Strike 2025-1 happens, the US will also be taking part in Defender 25, another maritime operation involving NATO. This one will test the US military's ability to send equipment and troops over long distances to locations ranging from the Arctic and the Black Sea to the Mediterranean. Once its ships arrive at their destinations, the US will take part in a trio of operations that involve 18 other countries, many of which are NATO allies, and some of which, such as Greece, will also be taking part in Neptune Strike 2025-1. Commanding General of the US Army in Europe and Africa, General Christopher Donahue, explains the purpose of Defender 25. This is about global deterrence, he says. Everything we demonstrate we can do with our allies and partners, we can pick up and do anywhere. Defender gets us sets and reps at theatre logistics and warfighting at scale that isn't being done anywhere else right now. Defender 25 started on April 10. That means two major military exercises are going on right now that Russia wants to know more about. Did the Viktor Leonov loiter in Irish waters because it was simply waiting for a chance to sneak away to observe these operations? Perhaps. However, there's another potential reason for the ship's presence, one that's far more terrifying than Putin's desire to keep track of his enemy's naval operations. Russia might be planning massive subsea cable attacks near Ireland. The country's waters are certainly a legitimate target. According to the UK Defence Journal, over 20 undersea cables land on Irish shores, with the country's waters essentially acting as a way station for cables that extend to North America and other parts of Europe. Those cables are used by many tech companies and financial institutions to enable rapid transactions and data transfer, which is where the problem comes into play. Russia may be planning to attack those cables in several ways. That might involve severing them, destroying their ability to transmit data, or Russia may have the even more nefarious goal of using its spy ships and other technology to intercept the data being sent via these cables. Either way, there's massive potential for Russia to cause severe economic damage to the US and several European countries if it targets the undersea cables near Ireland. That's not to mention the likelihood that at least some of these cables are used by Ireland and its European allies for military purposes. On April 10, a day before Ireland spotted the Viktor Leonov in its waters, the Telegraph reported that the military chiefs within NATO had been warned about potential Russian attacks on subsea cables. That warning came in the form of a letter jointly written by some of the European Union and UK's largest telecoms companies, such as Vodafone, Orange and Telefonica. The repercussions of damage to subsea cables extend far beyond Europe, potentially affecting global internet and power infrastructure, international communications, financial transactions, and critical services worldwide, the open letter claims. Suddenly, a Russian spy ship loitering in waters where many undersea cables are situated seems a lot more sinister. And for more evidence that cables and not NATO or Cuba are in Russia's mind, look at the stats. The Telegraph says that around 500 massive undersea cables responsible for carrying around 95% of all international data. Those cables run across sea and ocean floors, making them extremely difficult to access. That hasn't stopped Russia from trying, and in some cases succeeding. Putin's ships have been at their most active in the Baltic Sea, which borders the likes of Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and several Nordic nations. Between October 2023 and April 2025, 11 of the cables lying underneath the Baltic Sea's waves have been damaged. Not uncoincidentally, over 50 Russian ships have been observed in the sea's waters during that time, including the previously mentioned Yantar. What are those ships doing? The spy ships are likely mapping the locations of the undersea cables before Russia follows up with wide-scale sabotage attacks designed to take those cables out. All of these incidents are another example of growing Russian aggression, according to UK Defence Secretary John Healey. I also want President Putin to hear this message. We see you, we know what you're doing, and we will not shy away from robust action to protect this country. Ireland will likely want to deliver the same message, with its close relationship to the UK, meaning it may well be included in the threat being made to Russia's leader. So what is Putin doing? He's launching a hybrid war against many European nations, starting with deep-sea sabotage. What he's done in the Baltics, along with what he appears to be attempting to do around Ireland and the UK, are just a few examples. Take the mystery of the vanishing cable as another. In a July 2024 report, which was accompanied by a YouTube video, Bloomberg explained that Norway faces a similar situation to those other nations coming under threat from Russia's undersea exploits. Bloomberg spoke to Guaosong Zhang, who currently works for the Norwegian Institute of Marine Research. Located in the city of Bergen, the institute has 1,100 employees. Zhang is among the most important. He often works in one of the institute's 8 ships, from which he monitors and maintains a series of 5 microphones installed along a 31-mile undersea cable lying on the floor of the Norwegian Sea. Norway doesn't offer many details about the cable, with Bloomberg suggesting it may be used to identify ships passing through the country's waters. In 2021, Zhang returned from his Easter break to discover that the signals from the cable microphones had gone quiet. That wasn't unusual. Power outages are common in the area where Zhang operates. However, he started to worry when a systems reboot didn't restore operations, with a call to the IT company that helped him maintain the equipment also proving fruitless. Something had gone wrong. Very wrong. Zhang took his crew out to sea to figure out the issue, discovering that a specific segment of the cable was causing electrical issues. That segment lay 17 miles off the Norwegian shore, well within the country's territorial waters. It took 5 months for Zhang to convince a company to fund a mission to check out the cable. Once the mission was underway, Zhang deployed an 8,000-pound robot measuring 6 feet by 6 feet by 10 feet to check the cable segment. That's when he saw the damage. Not only had the equipment feeding into the cable been damaged, but the cable itself had been completely torn away. It was missing, and nobody knew why. However, the odds are high that it had something to do with Russia. Putin has deployed his country's massive submarine fleet into Norway's waters enough times in the past to cause issues with Norway. The country even released footage of Russia's attack submarines on patrol, where they surveil and threaten Russia's neighbor. But the most damning evidence came from an investigation into the cable disappearance. It discovered that a Russian ship named the Sami had spent time in the waters just above the missing cable on April 3, 2021. That ship, which measures 197 feet long, was seen traveling at a speed of about 10 knots back and forth over the cable. It made 4 passes. I saw this boat, only this one boat, cross the cable at this time, Zhang later said. I locked my suspicion on this one boat. The investigation showed that the cable went dead at precisely the moment the Sami was floating above. It had to be Russia. Again. And therein lies the problem that Ireland now faces. A Russian spy ship loitering in its waters is concerning enough, but it's what these types of ships do when they're not being watched closely that should terrify people. The Sami got away with destroying a key piece of Norwegian undersea cable because of the Easter break. Maybe it's no coincidence that the Viktor Leonov was in Irish waters at around Easter time in April 2025. Finland also hasn't escaped Russia's attention. According to Politico, sabotage has occurred twice in the Gulf of Finland in the 18 months prior to April 2025. The commander of Finland's Coast Guard, Ilja Ilgin, puts it plainly. This is becoming more common. We have become more aware of the risk, and we're currently trying to figure out ways for how to properly respond. In other words, what we've just seen off the coast of Ireland is far from an isolated incident. It's part of a pattern of deep-sea sabotage. And those sabotage efforts are part of a wider campaign of hybrid warfare Putin has launched against the European nations that threw their support behind Ukraine following his February 2022 invasion. It's not just ships. The Parliament magazine says that Russia conducted 44 incidents of hybrid warfare across Europe in 2024 compared to just 13 the year before. Those incidents include the assassination of a Russian defector, interfering with elections in Romania, and starting a fire that destroyed the largest shopping centre in the Polish capital of Warsaw. Add to that the 56 acts of vandalism, sabotage, targeted violence that Europe has recorded that it can trace back to Russia, and Putin's goal becomes clear. He's intensifying his operations to threaten Europe at a time when Ukraine needs the continent's backing. These incidents are becoming more frequent. They're also expanding geographically, covering more European territory than ever before. What just happened off the Irish coast is a microcosm of a far greater problem. Putin is waging a shadow war against everybody he believes opposes him, and he's doing it in a way that allows him to deny responsibility whenever he's called out. It appears that Viktor Leonov didn't do any damage to the undersea cables off Ireland's coast, but perhaps it wasn't meant to. The ship spending so much time loitering may mean that it's gathered all of the data needed for another Russian ship to venture into Irish waters in the future. If that's the case, it may not be long before we see a segment of the Irish cables get destroyed. And there'll be no mystery about who's behind the attack if it happens. Zhang already proved what Russia is up to back in 2021, and there have been many more incidents traced back to Putin ever since. The question instead is, what will Ireland, and Europe as a whole, do to stop Russia's hybrid warfare attempts? Let us know what you think the answer to that question might be in the comments, along with sharing your thoughts about what the Viktor Leonov was doing in Irish waters at all. And remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more videos covering Russia's latest attempts to upset the European power balance. We're an independent source of up-to-date news about military conflicts around the globe and greatly appreciate your support.